Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Distinguished thought leaders, warm welcome to Purpose Roundtable. 21 years ago, when I started Organic BPS, my father asked me to read Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. I was surprised at the suggestion. What's the connection between Bapuji and business? Years ago, Gandhiji had predicted what eventually would destroy us. Science without humanity, knowledge without character, politics without principle, business without morality. And these words have greater relevance today than ever before, as the pandemic continues to threaten life, livelihood, and every aspect of our lives. When people are frightened and unsure, brands can play an active, critical role. Business leaders can begin by leading with purpose to take care of their people, customers, and communities. Today, on the occasion of our 21st anniversary, I'm extremely happy to announce the launch of the Center for Higher Purpose in Business. We envisage the center as a global community of thought leaders who believe in the power of purpose and will evolve a body of knowledge through co-creation and cross-pollination of insightful ideas. The center will explore and develop a purpose charter based on the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations. Our first initiative is the Purpose Roundtable, a series of thought leadership conversations. And I'm grateful, extremely grateful to all of you for joining us from different parts of the world for this very first edition. In this new era, the best companies and brands will be those that are built on the foundations of a purpose, a higher purpose based on fundamental human truth with deep-seated conviction and for universal good. Purpose is a new narrative for business. Mission is the what, vision is the where, and purpose is the why of business. Commerce has to move from transaction to transformation and from competition to cooperation. And thus, 21st century organizations will demonstrate doing good is indeed good business. As Warren Buffett said, someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Now it is up to us to plant the seeds of purpose so we can ensure a safer, better, and brighter tomorrow. On behalf of Organic BPS and the Center for Higher Purpose in Business, let me extend a hearty welcome to the distinguished thought leaders who are here with us today. Let me have the privilege of introducing these eminent leaders to you through a short video.
Dr. Azad Moopen is the founder of Aster DM Healthcare with operations in GCC and India, employing over 20,000 people and serving 20 million patients every year. A dedicated philanthropist, Dr. Moopen has earmarked large part of his personal wealth for charity through Aster Volunteers. He sees profit as a byproduct, and his initiatives in many fields are providing hope to millions across geographies. The Government of India has awarded him with the prestigious Padma Shri and Pravasi Bharatiya Samman. Dr. Diane Dodd is president of the International Institute of Gastronomy, Culture, Arts and Tourism and co-founder of the European Region of Gastronomy Award that has grown into a significant platform to support regional development. She has worked in the cultural policy and management field for over 20 years and maintains relations with various organizations like the European Commission, UNESCO, the Council of Europe and the European Cultural Foundation. A corporate strategist, author, and a liberal thinker, Dr. Rajan focuses on environment, social, and governance (ESG) issues in India. Before starting EQ, he served the Tata Group for 23 years, and his last role was that of the group's chief ethics officer and brand custodian. Dr. Rajan was on the boards of various Tata companies, including Tata Teleservices, Tata Communications, Tata SIA Airlines, Tata AIG, and the TCS Foundation. The World Economic Forum recognized his purposeful initiatives and transcendental vision by honoring him as a young global leader. Dr. Rajan is an alumnus of IIT Delhi and Oxford University. Mr. Irani joined the Mahindra Group in 2007 and has led such functions as strategy and branding, among others, before taking over as president, Group HR and Communications. He is also responsible for CSR and corporate services. Mr. Irani led the development of the group's brand position and core purpose, RISE. He is a member of Mahindra's Group Executive Board. Before joining Mahindra Group, he spent 22 years with Unilever in various capacities and across geographies. He is an alumnus of the prestigious Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies and Harvard Business School.
On behalf of the Center and Organic, I would like to extend warm greetings to all those who are watching this event from across the world. Let me welcome and introduce today's discussion leader, world-renowned mentor and growth multiplier, Mr. V.K. Madhav Mohan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dilip. I consider it a great fortune compounded by privilege that I'm going to be interacting with such a stellar array of thought leaders, literally from around the world. Thank you. And I look forward to sharing thoughts and insights with all of you. And perhaps we can engage in a conversation, which I think is the best form of human interchange, not just dialogues, but conversations. And I think world over, there is a great need for intensifying and expanding the scope and range of conversations. Be that as it may, perhaps I can do a little context setting and then take you through the four major themes that we'd like to converse about today. A year ago, the human species was like a rabbit caught in the proverbial glare of an onrushing truck with the virus. And just 12 odd months later, we are talking about at least 80 or 90 vaccines in the making. And people are gearing up and tooling up to produce and distribute vaccines all over the world and making sure that the most at-risk, vulnerable members of our population get it first. What this tells us is the human species is so resilient. And that, in fact, is one of the basic points that Hariri makes in his book, Sapiens. You know, in 70,000 odd years that we have been around on this planet, we have out-survived virtually every other species. But what is more important is we have out-thought every other species, what he calls the cognitive revolution. And we can see that in full flow in the last 12 months or so. And so I think this is an inflection point for human beings, Homo sapiens as a whole. And I, for one, I'm very sanguine that we will start making real progress and we'll start making a real difference to the environment herein afterwards. Having suffered the kind of trauma that we have all suffered in all areas. So a lot of things are not going to be the same again. And I think this is going to fundamentally alter the way everybody thinks about life, work, business, organizations, and indeed what is important and who is important in our lives. So I think it's very, very appropriate that we talk about this whole concept of doing good. Doing good is good business. Just to expand on that a little further, good, of course, need not necessarily be from an anthropocentric perspective. And I think that is the true meaning of the word environmental sustainability. We ought to be a little less anthropocentric from now on, and use that as a definition of good. It also includes sustainability, governance, ethical conduct. But good business means, I think, all boats rise. And I think we have to go way beyond the cliched win-win. We really have to make sure that all boats rise when the tide comes in. Wherever the boats may be, whosoever may own the boats, and whoever may crew the boats, all boats need to rise. And fundamental to all that, I think, is clarity of purpose. Academic thinkers like Mukund will be familiar with the work of Ari Digus, who wrote this very famous book, Ruzbeh. All of you may have read this book called The Living Organism, The Living Organization. And Ari Digus was a Dutch researcher who basically likened an organization to an organism. So if cells make an organism, people make an organization. So if people have a purpose, the sum total, agglomeration, combination, call it what you may, will result in the discovery of the organization's purpose. So there's a lot to be learned from the internal journey of human beings. And I think one of the fundamental things that people need to have is what the Japanese call Ikigai, the purpose for which we wake up every morning. And if we can use those same disciplines to discover as an organization why we exist, I think we would have done the whole species a huge service, and not just the species, but the planet as a whole. But human beings tend to be very self-centered, but they must remember what Marcus Aurelius once very famously said. All of us are like leaves on a tree, and the leaves can fall. He was alluding, of course, to the fact that we can lose everything and everyone in the flash of an eye. I was very excited to see Mukund's interview with one of the channels after your wonderful book was published last year, Mukund. And in that you talk about how you had to chase up 2 flights of stairs to the 4th floor and be told by the man himself that he'd been kind of removed. So it's a metaphor really of how things can change in a flash for every one of us. And that is so true. And Marcus Aurelius, millennia ago, had the wisdom and foresight to recognize it. And I wish we could instill that kind of feeling in everybody around us. And that would bring a lot more humility, I think, certainly amongst the highest echelons of leadership. Because I think arrogance is the very antithesis of an organization's survivability, so to speak. But having said all that, I think purpose operates at the intersection of ethics, trust, teamwork, passion, etc. Just like Ikigai operates at the intersection of passion, professionalism, and mission. So I'm drawing a parallel between an individual's Ikigai and an organization's Ikigai purpose. So the broad themes which we were quite anxious to dive into are basically, why is higher purpose imperative? And the link, the second area would be the link between purpose, profit, growth, and values. And thirdly, living the purpose. I'm sure as leaders, you've experienced this in many organizations where you spend fancy sums of money and huge amounts of time on developing a vision, only to see it being, nailed to a wall and not owned in the hearts, and therefore not lived on the floor. And the fourth area is the link and the symbiosis between the purpose of an organization and its brand. And then, of course, we'll summarize and conclude and talk about the way forward. So without much further ado, purpose has become the discussion point in virtually every corporate forum. But is purpose imperative in business? What are your thoughts? Maybe Dr. Azad Moopen can go with that, and then we'll all build in. We can all join in and dive in. Is purpose really imperative to business?
Yeah, thank you, Madhav. Thanks a lot. It has been a very good introduction, setting the context, and I very firmly feel that purpose has to be an imperative, and it has to be one of the most important contents of whatever we are doing. You mentioned about business. We are all into business, and the morality in business, how we can create an atmosphere where that thrives and that is being nourished is extremely important if we have to go forward as a company, as a country, and globally also when we look at. So answering your question, yes, it's extremely important. So I have been lucky being a doctor and later a healthcare investor or entrepreneur to be in a business which has the opportunity to do good every time you touch a patient, every time you come across somebody. So unless and until you have that imperative of helping somebody, I don't think there will be any sort of a satisfaction coming out of that for anybody, for the patient, for the people who are treating, or ultimately even the people like us who are getting the fruits of that. So we started off this journey with a principle that in healthcare, profit has to be a byproduct. It shouldn't be the aim. That was very simply told to people 30 years back when we started this journey. And we always thought that the aim has to be to help people and the profit should be a byproduct. So we coined our vision, mission, everything along that, and said that it has to be a caring mission with a global mission, making quality healthcare accessible and affordable to people. So what I'm trying to say is that unless and until you have something very, definite there to tell people, like what you said, many times the mission statements, the vision, everything hangs on the wall. But we made it very clear that it has to be percolating and going to the grassroots level. So this makes it imperative for anybody who is coming into the company to know that what the company feels, what the company wants, and what is the vision of the people who are at the top of the company. And to tell you the truth, this has significantly helped us. That single thing of shared vision with our employees, with the shareholders, as well as with the external world and the authorities. It has really helped us to state that, okay, this is our purpose. We want to help people. They are in the center of our world. And whatever we are doing is to help them. And whatever is outcome is only a byproduct. So answering your question, it's very important that we have to put the purpose as a very important content of our businesses. And it's very, very imperative.
You know, that's amazing clarity. We have often heard about profit not being important, but Azad actually says profit is a byproduct. Mukund, what's your take on all this? I mean, you come from a pedigree where higher order things are far more important. And so very keen to listen to your perspective.
Very similar perspective. Madhav, you're quite right. I spent so much of my formative career in the Tata Group. And in Tata's, you have this quote which is attributed to the founder of the Tata Group, Jamsetji Tata, going back over 150 years, when he said that in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but is in fact the very purpose of its existence. And really the way you need to interpret that is if you don't have a successful, thriving community, and in that community I would include not just living beings, but also everything else that you see around you, including the natural environment and all the constituents of that, you really can't have a successful and thriving enterprise. You need successful customers, you need successful investors, you need successful employees to be able to build a successful long-term organization. So very much identify with what Dr. Moopen just said. So really speaking, purpose at the heart of it is about who you are and what you stand for. And I think if you can get clarity on that and you're able to communicate that well, you're able to then align all your stakeholders in your mission, in what you're trying to achieve and do. And that's when you're actually able to build trust. And that's another word that you hear a lot of, I think, in the past 2 decades, ever since maybe some of the corporate scams of the early 2000s in the global financial crisis, and more recently, some of the issues that we've seen, including in India. I think trust is at the heart of what it takes to build a successful economy. We are seeing the absence of trust in the issues the banking sector faces, in the number of insolvency and bankruptcy cases with some of India's most famous brands. You need to rebuild that. And I think the starting point for a lot of that is purpose, which is energizing and which rallies and aligns all your stakeholders.
You know, Mukund, it's very interesting you talked about trust. In fact, one of the probably or arguably one of the first academic works in establishing the connect between trust and profits was done by one of your own former colleagues, I think, Professor Nirmalya Kumar, who wrote, according to me, a very seminal article in 1996 about the importance of trust in manufacturing, in the relationship between manufacturing and retailers. And as early as 1986, he postulated that if you have a relationship of trust between manufacturers and their retailing partners, then sales and profit would be statistically significantly higher. So trust is profitable.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And as you said, yes, Diane, I was just coming to you.
Lost a lot of trust.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have lost a lot of trust amongst younger generations because they are the ones that are now really protesting and saying, look, we have to do something about climate change. We're not doing enough. What are you doing? They're the ones that are going to live with the consequences of climate change. And so I think there is a real need right now for leaders to take this on board and to build that. Otherwise, you will lose their trust. And it's already happening. So when we're working with the regions of gastronomy, one of the things that we have seen is that because our values are always to do with sustainability, and what we try to drive home is the need to protect plant and animal varieties, therefore protect the biodiversity of an area by resuscitating old recipes, by innovating on traditions, by putting a highlight on traditional gastronomy and food, therefore instilling pride in a community. But the whole basis and value is sustainability at the end of the day. And we have public, private, third sector, knowledge institution partners. When they come to the table, I have to say, it's quite warming to see that it's the private sector that take this on board first. They say, wow, yes, we need to do differently. We need to work harder. We need to commit. Very often they don't know how to do that. So, you know, that's where we come in to try to help to share ideas and good practices. And it's the public sector that often are dragging their feet until they get to the table and they understand the values and the principles underpinning what we're doing. And at that point, you know, the civil servant, the poor civil servants that have been sent to the table to deal with this program, you know, who come and say, oh, do I have to, you know, they leave enthused and excited, because what we're talking about are real deep values, and it's about building a better future for everybody. And that's when they go home excited, and you see them transform from somebody who does a 9-to-5 job into somebody who becomes a passionate advocate. And that is that transformational moment that we always seek in our work. And it comes from the values and the principles underpinning what we're doing.
Actually, Diane has done something really interesting. When I was looking at the IGCAT, I was able to discern that their purpose is to improve the quality of life for all. This was one of the driving, one of the drivers of the institution that Diane heads. It's interesting. Gastronomy, culture, tourism, not for the sake of earning the dollars, but to improve the quality of life for everyone.
Yes,
That's such a wonderful
really
formulation.
Well, and it goes hand in hand. The social, cultural, and economic transformation of a region is really so interconnected. You can't have one without the other. And when we talk about circular economy and we talk about the need to support citizens economically, if you don't have a unique selling point, if you haven't actually instilled a sense of pride and belonging in people, that actually what they have counts and can be profitable, then you've failed in an endeavor. But we have to remember that not everybody starts from the same point. So, you know, small businesses, they don't have huge marketing budgets. Very often they can't be visible. And in marketing, if you're not visible, you don't exist. So this is about building communities and cross-marketing through them to ensure that everybody can have a certain amount of visibility, but also that the principles that underline what we're doing come across. And what we're finding is that younger generations are really tapping into that. They love what we're doing because younger generations want to be responsible. They want to be ethical. When they travel now, they look about how they're going to leave something into the local community, and they want to connect with locals at a very respectful level. So I think it's win-win-win-win. You know, everybody can work together. It's a question of finding the route for that to happen effectively.
Ruzbeh has been at the forefront of discovering purpose, not only in his group, but perhaps in the entire industry. And I think that's probably the reason why he is kind of pioneered the Formula E and, you know, that direction. So what are your perspectives on this whole question of purpose being imperative in business as well?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I think all of you have made some outstanding points. So I'm only going to complement or add to what has already been said. I'll say 2 or 3 things. first of all, in my view, purpose creates alignment. Right? It clearly states the organization's view of the world. Why are we existing? What's the core reason for our existence, right? And if you don't believe in that core reason of existence, then you should not be part of our movement. So I think that creating that alignment is very, is one of the core things that purpose does. If you look at the Mahindra group, we are such a diverse group. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. Right? We are into industries which very much like the Tata Group span, from manufacturing to service to we have an aircraft company, we have an agri products company, we sell tractors, automobiles, IT services, you name it. We are into very diverse industries. The one thing that actually is the red thread underlying all of this is our core purpose. All of us share that common core purpose. So alignment. The second thing is, in one word, is creating passion. So, I actually read a quote in a Harvard Business Review article, which goes back to 1994. So this is not new, right? This is, and this is from Christopher Bartlett and Shumantra Ghoshal. So what they said, and the part of the quote I'm going to read out to you is, senior managers must convert contractual employees of an economic entity into committed members of a purposeful organization. So we have to rise above being transactional. And you can only do that if you have a purpose. And the last thing I will say, and that's, I think, only stressing a point that has already been made by all of you, which is that, when I think back to 35 years ago, when I started work, okay, when I joined the workforce 35 years ago, I was a young man then. I think, I think at that time, Maslow's hierarchy of needs really operated. So, to put it crudely, all of us, at least we thought, roti, kapda, makan, pehle hum secure kar le, uske baad duniya ko badlenge. But the youth of today don't think like this, by the way. Huh? I think today, the youth of today, for them, purpose comes before roti, kapda or makan. It comes before food, clothing, and shelter, or it's at par with needs, wants, and necessities. It is a necessity today. So, and this generation is not only your consumer, this generation is also your employee. So, and the last thing I would say is that, I mean, even the investors are demanding it. So even the people whom you would expect would look first at the financial return, today are saying ESG, they're giving premium to ESGs, to ESG investments. In fact, they're demanding it. So the investors themselves are demanding it. So I think if you look at it 360 degrees, it's no longer a luxury. It's no longer a good thing to have. It's no longer something to pontificate on and, nail to the wall after you've got it right, after you wordsmithed it correctly. It's an absolute necessity.
So insightful. You hit the nail, I think, on the head when you said that this is purpose is the glue, really, and it creates alignment, kind of raison d'etre, reason why we are all here, kind of a thing. And you talked about ESG and the fact that outstanding leaders like Mukund have gone away from the mainstream and plunged into ESG and furthering it itself is proof of the pudding, I think. Like somebody like Mukund, who is at the acme of his career, decides to make a huge change and plunge in. That says so much both about him and the concept.
Correct.
And you know, fundamentals never change. Fundamentals, you talked about this HBR article 1994, and the concept in it are as true today as they were then. And that just beautifully, seamlessly takes me into the next area, the interlink between purpose, profit, growth, and values. You know, the connection between all these things. We talked about trust, which is one of the fundamentals, but what's the connection between purpose, profit, growth, and values? And here, I'd just like to quote one sentence from a very, very classic HBR article again, by Douglas Sherwin, November 1983 issue of HBR, 1983. He says, quote, and I quote, "When business behavior violates values that connect with the purpose and nature of business, I call that behavior unethical." How prescient was that? And talking about values, you know, Chris Christensen's book says that all his classmates in Harvard were busy trying to stay out of jail. So much for values. Mukund, I know that you have been in this space of values, ethics, having been the chief ethics officer of the Tata Group. So what do you think are the real connects between purpose and values ethics? And does clarity of values give you growth?
Sure. So since we're, I think, quoting a lot of people who are shaping the markets, let me add one quote which I was quite struck by. And this is actually a quote from Larry Fink, who of course heads BlackRock, and whose annual letters to CEOs are now becoming as famous as Warren Buffett's annual message to shareholders. So in his 2019 letter to CEOs, he actually says, "Profits and purpose are inextricably linked. Profits are essential if a company is to effectively serve all of its stakeholders over time, not only shareholders, but also employees, customers, and communities. Similarly, when a company truly understands and expresses its purpose, it functions with the focus and strategic discipline that drive long-term profitability. Purpose unifies management, employees, and communities. It drives ethical behavior and creates an essential check on actions that go against the best interests of stakeholders. Purpose guides culture, provides a framework for consistent decision-making, and ultimately helps sustain long-term financial returns for the shareholders of your company." So I think he's really sort of captured all the relevant considerations. And given that they are the world's largest money manager today, I think what somebody like him says is a reflection of the changing times. You made the point, drawing from what Ruzbeh said earlier about ESG. And it's quite striking that today the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, which is where investors are sort of putting their money through organizations like this, it is now subscribing to principles based on leveraging ESG to decide where you put your money. The funds that are now committed to the UNPRI are over $80 trillion. So it's trillion with a T. That's a huge amount of capital now that is actually committing to adopt ESG principles in the way it gets deployed. So consequently, obviously, the ask from companies is that they show the kind of performance that they're delivering on ESG principles. And in that, I think going back to your question about values, I think that's critical because values is really what gives substance to the kind of core purpose that you define for yourself. So the two are inextricably linked and connected. And I think people want to see whether you're living up to your values in all your actions, and your purpose helps to perhaps give them some guidance on which values are really critical and core to the way you're going to conduct your business and operations. So I think all of this is really coming together at a time when the world really needs to see more of this. So I think Ruzbeh really hit the nail on the head when money, big money and investor commitment is now pushing the agenda in that same direction.
So when does purpose become a higher purpose? I mean, you can have a purpose, but it's the higher purpose really that, kind of excites and gives a jump start to the whole organization. Not just the purpose, higher purpose. Yes, go ahead.
Can I give an example? I think
Please.
That's a brilliant point because, you have a lot of plain vanilla vision statements, which, as you say, sometimes just get nailed to the wall and left there because people really don't relate to it as well as they might. But there's some fantastic examples of the way people can actually take the purpose-driven agenda forward. Take the example of an insurance company that is focused on Dr. Moopen's area, which is healthcare. If my purpose is simply to provide clever products that allow people to access insurance for healthcare, maybe it's a nice purpose. It may make sense to a lot of stakeholders. If I went further and set my purpose, and this is talking to your point about higher purpose, if the purpose was really to extend life expectancy and to actually reduce healthcare costs for people who take my insurance premium, that makes a huge difference. That's a very different purpose. I'm almost telling people that I want to actually make your quality of life significantly better by reducing your cost and increasing your lifespan. And now come and deal with me as an insurance company. So two very different ways of communicating what you're trying to do. So absolutely, I think there's an evolution that takes place as you refine your purpose over time, as you become more confident about the stance you can take in the market, as you become more confident about the way in which stakeholders relate to you, as you become more aware of the trust that you've created and the bonds and ties with the community. So I think that's quite a valid point.
In fact, the minute we transcend into higher purpose, I think we are within touching distance of spirituality. And so higher purpose kind of converges at some point, at least at the lower end with spirituality. And this is something Dr. Azad Moopen has talked about a lot, I think. A lot of the time, you in your own journey have alluded to the fact that there is a hand of God showing you the way. And there are certain decisions you will not do, even if it means a huge opportunity cost. So higher purpose is something that has been of great interest and meaning to you, Dr. Moopen?
Yeah. So that's a fantastic question. Just extending what Dr. Rajan said, I think in healthcare again, there is a significant opportunity for you to go to that higher purpose level. I don't know whether you have heard the company called Kaiser Permanente in US. This is a healthcare company. It's a system actually, starting from primary care on to hospitals. And they brought in a system where the people are covered through insurance of their own. And the whole idea of the healthcare organization, Kaiser Permanente, is to reduce utilization because they have very pertinent data which tells that only a small percentage of investment in the wellness sector will prevent large number of people coming to the clinics or hospitals and taking medicines because these people are covered through insurance by them. So it's an ecosystem where people enter as a boy or a girl and dies with them. And during that journey, the purpose is to keep them well. So they get all incentives for having better, stopping smoking, reducing their weight, doing the checkups regularly. They get huge incentives and reduction in premium if they do that. So in a healthcare, that's a fantastic example where you go to that level of higher purpose. Now coming to the brass tracks, what we are doing in the healthcare when we are, doing the normal healthcare that we know. We found that that again is extremely useful. I'll tell you an example. Recently, you had asked this question whether doing business with good purpose, will it be profitable? So we recently found that we have huge capacity which is sitting in our hospitals in the form of investigations which are not being done. For example, if you buy a MRI or a CT scan or a PET CT, only 50% utilization, 40% utilization. So we decided that why don't we open up to people who are really in requirement of that but doesn't have the money. Maybe we can give it for 25% or 50% of the cost. And you won't believe the response was tremendous. And not only that, that also gave confidence to the doctors sitting in the periphery and all, that it is a place where they are doing good for the people. So we should be supporting them. So we had large number of referrals coming, not only for the investigations, but for everything. So that is something which I think it's very important. Still another example coming from our own healthcare sector is that we were having earlier the Aster brand, which was catering to the mid-income segment. And we also have a higher brand called Medcare, which is to the high net worth individuals or upper income segment. So we thought that we should do something because these corporate hospitals are not accessible to people who are not able to afford. So we started a brand called Access for the blue collar workers as well as people who don't have that much of disposable income in the GCC. And you won't believe, we got much more profit coming out of that, even though we were doing it at, say, 25% of what we were doing the business for the higher brands. We got much more profit because of the volume. And more importantly, there was that satisfaction. We talked about the values and all. So of our 6 values that we have put forth and which was hanging there, and which of course it is now in the minds of people and it has percolated. So 3 or 4 things really, it aligns with whatever we were doing. The requirement for compassion, which was very important as a value for us. The respect we have for people from all the categories, and also the passion to do that. Our doctors were fully committed to that. So what I'm trying to say is that it's very important that we look at the ways of transcending ourselves from what we are doing and do it because that's your purpose. You are there to take care of patients in our case, and do that with passion and integrity, and then profits will come, like what I said. It will be a byproduct of whatever we are doing.
Fascinating. So if you focus on the important things, then profit is bound to follow you.
Yeah.
Earlier, Ruzbeh made this point about alignment, and purpose has this ability to align people. Isn't that something that you're doing, Diane, in your day-to-day work? I mean, you are aligning communities with culture and purpose. And in that respect, living the purpose. So what's the role of the community and indeed culture, both internal and external, in achieving this higher purpose?
Yes, you talked about alignment before. We call it vision, and a shared vision for the community. And so we don't work with communities until they have developed a shared vision and a stakeholder group across public, private, third sector, and knowledge institutions. We don't even start working with them until they make that commitment. And they work together, because what we've discovered is when people talk together, when they actually communicate together, they come to the same conclusions. And people are good. In our hearts, we're good. We get wrapped up in our own silos, and we end up working for profit, or we're working for but actually, the bigger picture, which is where we're all going together, becomes so much more important. And until you actually talk to each other, you don't realize where you fit into the cogs that move you in that direction. And so that's why we have alignments between agriculture and tourism, hospitality, and so on, and the arts and culture. All of us have a role to play in a community to help it develop. And it's really interesting to see that when people talk together, they come to that conclusion, they develop a shared vision together, which instills a passion and pride in what they're doing and their role in what they're doing. And what we've discovered is then that 2 and 2 doesn't make 4 anymore. 2 and 2 makes 8. So when people are working together, it's not about more money, it's about shared vision, and then the resources come. And what we've found that has created a huge enthusiasm in the regions, and it brings many people on board, because one of our principles is that to be in the program, you need to commit to doing something differently. And that means reinvesting in the community. It means cutting your carbon emissions. It means cutting on plastic waste. It means cutting on food waste, or it means ensuring that you're buying a percentage of local ingredients to work with. So by incentivizing in some ways, and because everybody feels that they want to be part of this shared vision, it kind of pushes everybody in the same direction, and it's very motivating to watch that transformation. It's not me that's doing it, it's the people in each of the regions. So a lot of my work as a leader is empowering other leaders to do their work and supporting them.
And that's when the community gets on board completely.
Absolutely. And, I think, going back to trust again, once a company shows that they're reinvesting in the community and that they're willing to make changes to and commitments, it's not just about accepting sponsorship for a program or a project anymore. We don't accept sponsorship unless that company is going to do something positive for the community, as well as give us the money for a program. So it's, it's a way of saying, look, our values are stronger than your money. So, you have to commit, not just in terms of supporting us, but in terms of showing that you share our values, and show that you share our values by committing and stating what you're going to do differently. And we've had a very positive response to that. It's interesting because, as I say, private sector very often want to do it. They just haven't been thought about what they should do. And so when we have these conversations and they understand the vision that the community wants, it's much easier.
Actually, when everybody comes together, that's when synergy flows. And, the true value of an organization can be perceived when the synergy flows in all directions. Ruzbeh has been at the cutting edge of creating brands, and Mukund has been the brand custodian. Gentlemen, what would you think is the link and the alignment again between the organization and its brand? A lot of the time you see organizations speaking with forked tongues. The brand gives a message quite different from what the organization is trying to send out. So how do you reconcile this? What are your thoughts on this?
So if I can just come in briefly there first, for us in the Mahindra Group, our core purpose and our brand promise is exactly the same thing. Our core purpose is rise, and our brand promise is we will enable you to rise. I'm talking brand Mahindra. Now, if you look at the totality of our core purpose, right, it reads like this. We will challenge conventional thinking and innovatively use all our resources to drive positive change in the lives of our stakeholders and communities across the world to enable them to rise. So the reason I read this out to you is because it talks about three things. It talks about challenging convention. It talks about using innovative means to drive positive change in the lives of our stakeholders to enable them to rise. Okay, so our brand talks about innovation. That's the first message, and we call that Futurize. Our brand talks about caring, and we call that Rise for Good. So the brand messaging and the storytelling that the corporate brand does is exactly about what our core purpose promises. I'll stop there. I just want to, with your permission, Madhav, just make one interesting point, what I think you will find interesting with respect to your previous question about the interplay of purpose and values.
Sure, sure.
And there I would just say that, of course, they have to be aligned. That goes without saying, right? But to us, what we found is that our core values are immutable. They've been with us for the last 75 years. They haven't changed, okay? Our organization's purpose, on the other hand, was different 75 years ago. So the Mahindra Group was born at the time India was born, around the same time. We were born in 1945. India gained independence in 1947, right? And our history, early history, mirrored the history of India. And at that stage, we had a purpose which spoke about Indians being second to none. And we will work passionately to prove that to the world. Now, that was a good purpose to have in its time. But as we became a global group, to have a purpose which said Indians are second to none, frankly, didn't make sense. And then we did once again introspect when we came with our current core purpose. Now, when our purpose changed, we asked ourselves the question, is this the time to reevaluate our values? And the answer we got is no. Values are immutable. In fact, values are the screen through which any action that you decide to take, right? So for example, our core purpose demands that we challenge convention. One of the behaviors we expect is accepting no limits, which is challenging convention. But the filter of accepting no limits is our core values. Right? So we will accept limits when it challenges one of our core values. That was the
great. So values are like the Sarnath pillar, immutable. But purpose is changeable.
So yes, purpose does not change every year or every 3 years, but it will change in the lifetime of an organization. Values
Over to you, Mukund.
So maybe I can make one quick comment on Ruzbeh's point just now, sure. Which also links back to a point you'd raised earlier, Madhav, about purpose and higher purpose. So just to mention, a few years back, I was involved in an exercise to revisit the Tata values, not the purpose, but the values. And we actually introduced a value which was not there prior to that period, which is a value called pioneering. Now, you could make the case that actually, as Ruzbeh says, it's always been a core value. It was just that for whatever reason, we'd not articulated it well enough. But you could also make the case that over time, you discover aspects of your legacy, your history, things that really make a difference maybe to the community today in a way that perhaps earlier you took for granted. And now it's important to specify those and articulate it better. So occasionally maybe values might also get enriched just by your learnings and understanding of history. It may not mean that they are very different from what you had in the past, but it's a better way of explaining yourself.
I think you used the word enriched very well there.
Right. Going back to your other question, Madhav, about the link between brand building and values, for instance. So I think if I take some examples from the Tata Group, of course, we're very blessed that we had this original conception of a vision of the Tata founder for the role of community in business. And it got maybe further credentialized by the fact that the principal ownership of the Tata Group moved into the hands of charities, which are today India's largest charities. So for employees in the Tata Group, and indeed for the brand custodians in our companies, there's a clear connect and there's an authenticity to your commitment to doing more for the community. In fact, the Tata core purpose is to improve the quality of life of the communities the group serves. So there's a link between that, your ownership structure, the business philosophy of your founder that has been carried through to successive chairmen. So a few years back, a couple of our companies ran interesting campaigns where they actually talked about their values, not necessarily the business. So I'll give you an example. Tata Steel, if you recall, ran a campaign called Values Stronger Than Steel. It's a very catchy phrase, but it was all about the Tata values. It wasn't actually about the product you were building. But another Tata company, Tata Capital in financial services, ran something that it called the Do Right campaign. And they ran a series of ads on television which just showed ways in which people do ethical things and try and sort of work for the benefit of other stakeholders, not so much about financial services per se. Now, this kind of connect in your brand, between your brand and your values, you have to be very careful. And in Tata's case, I think there was a certain level of authenticity. You could carry it off. But you're quite right that sometimes if there isn't walking the talk that happens behind the brand building campaign, people will see through it. And that's why you're often warned these days, especially in environmental issues, that there's so much quote unquote greenwashing that's happening. People are passing off things as a commitment to the environment and to society. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you don't find that. The second risk for even brands like Tata, and you saw that quite recently with this whole controversy on the Tanish cat, is people then expect you to be consistent and to live your values in every situation. So Tanish ran an ad, which is based on a campaign that they called Ekatvam, unity in the country. But within a few days, when there was a little bit of pushback on a particular rendition of that concept, they withdrew the ad. Then people start questioning, look, are you really committed? Because you say one thing and then the minute there's some pressure, it looks as if you didn't have the courage of conviction to follow it through. So, the stakes become higher if you profess to be a values-driven organization.
Authenticity is the key to it, I think. So absolutely. Alignment and authenticity, they have to go together. And also, don't you think it's equally important to tell the story properly? Use this pedagogy of storytelling. See, when Azad talked about the Kaiser Healthcare, he was actually telling the story of how they did something valuable. Are we using that pedagogy, that format, often enough in our organizations? What do you all say? It's a very powerful methodology, but are we using it enough? Are we telling enough authentic stories?
I mean, when I think about corporate histories, for instance, that get written, I think you're increasingly seeing that people are understanding the importance of these stories, particularly to convert your own employees into your best brand ambassadors and champions. And sometimes I have to also admit that there is a certain level of exaggeration. There are legends that are built around some of these stories, but it helps to make the point because people can sort of sense that there was a reality to this. There was something that actually happened. There's a way I can relate to the learnings from that. And then it becomes something that allows people to get much more connected. So absolutely, I think if you can pick actual issues, actual stories, the way people would relate to them and tell your story well, I think it's a huge, huge benefit in brand building.
So, yeah. Yes, over to you, Azad, and then we'll do a quick summary and share our closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mother. No, I was just trying to say that we, again, being in the healthcare organization, have the advantage of having a lot of stories because the best way in which you can get into the hearts of people is if there is a patient advocacy. So this happens especially with the social media, because earlier it all used to be partly doctored, because you have to use a journalist and who has to go and speak to the patient or the person who has been treated well. But now you have the situation where there are a lot of stories flooding in the internet as soon as you do something good, or most importantly, when you do something bad. So it's very important that you have to be extremely careful, because you are exposed. You are standing there naked. Anybody, any day can come out with some story. So we are extremely happy in this, and we have been supported significantly by the patient advocacy. So in fact, I always tell in our senior management meeting that the brand Aster, earlier we used to do a lot of ads and spend a lot of money. Now through the Aster Volunteers, which is our volunteer program, it's being known to people, accepted by people in a much more milder and happier way, rather than the earlier one, which they many times thought that it is a hard selling. This is a soft way in which you can get into the hearts of people. So you have to be aligned, you have to be doing good, and also you can, along with that, get the benefit out of it.
Very well put. Very well put.
In fact, Madhav, if I'll just add one or two sentences. I mean,
go ahead.
Totally echo what Dr. Azad Moopen just said. I think whether you like it or not, your stories will be told. Today there are the platforms, so there is the ability and there is the willingness. So there is social media, there are smartphones, and there are people just waiting to be heard, right? So your stories will be told. What we have to be careful about is that they are stories which are good stories, because you will be held to account one way or the other. And that in a strange way is another important reason why it's important to have a purpose, have values, and follow it, and actually adhere to them.
Absolutely. And the answer to that lies in what Mukund said a few minutes ago. There's no alternative to being authentic.
Absolutely. Because the world will see you for who you are. Whether you put on a facade or not, that is not going to last too long. Be rest assured of that, even if you try.
And with that, I'll try to kind of conclude it with a couple of points of summary, if I may. The first is, of course, purpose is crucial. And without a purpose, we are drifting in the sea of turbulence without a hope of redemption. So we need to discover the purpose and invest whatever time, effort, money, and pain may be required to discover it. It's like manthan, like you have to churn it and you have to discover it. So purpose has to be discovered, and it's imperative. Secondly, there is an inevitable, inexorable link between purpose, values, trust, in that order, and profit as a byproduct, as Dr. Azad Moopen said. And the third thing the third insight that came out was alignment. Alignment between purpose, perhaps with strategy, which will help you shift from a transactional point of view to more like a long-term relationship-based point of view. The next takeaway would be authenticity in all areas. And finally, the importance of storytelling is crucial to establish the power of purpose, not only in various aspects of the business, but also in the hearts of the people. That's when people and the organization start living with purpose. And finally, it's purpose that's going to help you transform from being a mere business into an institution, which is what I think Mahindra's, Tata's, Aster, and I think Diane's organization, all of you are actually people who are, you're actually alchemists who are converting businesses into institutions. And the two are vastly different. And institutions are what we need today, because they are the ones that hold the key to a better quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, having said all that, Dilip, I think you should share what vision you have of where we are going to go, the purpose of what we are trying to achieve. And then we'll ask our thought leaders for some advice and way forward.
It was indeed a great experience to listen to these stalwarts and the real stories. In fact, Dr. Azad Moopen, I had an interaction with him. We did one project in schools, Eco Tales, in our Greenstorm organization. He flew down from Dubai to attend to that, come to that government school. So what today everybody was talking about and everybody explained and is actually, if I can sum it up, it is something like, it's doing is being. That's whatever you do, then there is no problem with the social media stories, or if you are truly authentic. And this is the point where now in the past 20 years, when I was talking to, because I'm talking to people from the businessmen and entrepreneurs, when we talk about doing good business, purpose, and they say it's all good, nice sounding things, nice philosophy, it's good only for big corporates. Tatas can do, Mahindras can do, but now our business, no, it is not possible. This is really the feedback I get from the CEOs and the business owners. So then I realized, what is the way out? I was convinced from the day one when I got into this at that young age that you can be successful if you are purpose driven and if you are value based. But how can you demonstrate that? So that means you need to showcase the success stories. Showcase the success stories, say, for example, of Tatas, of Mahindras, of us, so that people will get inspired. So this is where I am coming from when we are talking about a center for higher purpose in business. It is actually people, because otherwise they will think, no, this is all good romantic things and nice stories. It is not possible. It is not, even if you want to become, if you want to grow your company, grow your business, you cannot do this. So this is the general tendency in the mid-level, mid-sized companies and all. So we were thinking of developing one. We need to, if we are saying this, we need to practice that. We need to walk the talk, and we need to create a community of people who believe in this and who actually does this and who are successful. Then open up the stories to the other fellow business community so that they get inspired. So that's how we thought of launching on our 21st anniversary, the Center for Higher Purpose in Business. It's a very humble beginning from the backyard of Cochin. We are not a big, but it is definitely I am confident that now, because of the purity of intent, people like you accepted our invitation is a clear example that when your intent is pure, people will listen to that. So my humble submission is to pick your thought processes, how we can evangelize or grow this concept among the business owners, business fraternity. This is what I want to take your inputs and to implement that and take this center forward. I would like to hear a few inputs from you.
Yeah. So who should start, Madhav?
Go ahead. Please go.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has been extremely insightful, and I don't think I have participated in anything like this. We participate in a lot of meetings. So very, very, revealing, and the way in which you put it, the overall as well as Dilip now what his idea is fantastic. So what I feel is that as you mentioned, that all the boats will rise when the tide comes. This, I think, is something which all of us as organizations should be keeping in mind, and we should be interacting with the like-minded organizations to see that everybody gets involved in that. There is a requirement for all of us to facilitate that and tell people what we are doing, as well as get their cooperation and association and take it forward. It's extremely important. We can set examples. In fact, I should tell you a very brief story which prompted me to focus more on the area of Astro volunteers, or the, in the area of philanthropy. I was in a conference in Mumbai when I came across a youngster who was running a courier service. And he had 270 people at that point of time. And now it has become more than 700 or so. Of these 270 people, he told me that everybody, all the 270 people who supply courier, except those sitting in the back office, are deaf and dumb. And that he has taken as a challenge. That's his purpose. He wants to help them. And that is such a purpose which actually helped him to grow his business. People came to know about it and people want to support him. So what I'm trying to say is that doing good business is, doing good is good business. There is no doubt about that. So let us all focus on that and hope that God will give us back, the people will give us back, the community will give us back, and we all should be focusing on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Floor is open.
So maybe I'll just supplement what Dr. Moopen just said. And I think, this broader movement around corporate purpose around the world, which is integrated into what you're seeing on the ESG movement, I think it all comes together quite nicely. And what's very important for Indian corporates and Indian businesses is increasingly, you talked about the large corporates, but increasingly across the supply chains, there is now a requirement that you actually assess and look at the way in which your supply chain partners are also performing. So I think the time for all of this has already come. I think a lot of the smaller businesses in India will need help and support. And therefore, what you're planning to create now, I think can be an extremely important and valuable tool that these small and medium enterprises, for instance, could leverage and utilize. And certainly from our side, we'd be very happy to offer mentorship, to participate in these kinds of programs where you can share best practices and experiences. And since you quoted Mahatma Gandhi, who's also my favorite author, his Story of My Experiments with Truth is my favorite book. There's this quote that's attributed to him, that find purpose and the means will follow. So I think you've embarked on a very important agenda, Dilip. So congratulations and good luck. And we're all there to support you. So well done. All the very best.
Absolutely. I join in congratulating you on the initiative and wish you all the best of luck. I agree with you completely that smaller businesses are going to need that sort of thought inspiration, and emerging leaders, people who haven't yet set up their businesses, but they are the ones, our future leaders. They're going to need some support and encouragement. And on that note, I would talk about women and their role in leadership and in the future. And one of the things that we discovered along the route was that women tend to not be motivated for profit or for their own, I would say, their own professional advancement. But when they realized that there was a higher purpose involved, they wanted to get involved. They are natural carers and they want to help their communities. And so what we found was that where they wouldn't have put themselves forward for a competition, as a chef, for example, initially, once we explained that this was about sustainability for the planet and it was about resuscitating recipes and it was about trying to support the community, then the women came forward. And so I think this will be a very valuable thing going forward as well, to really get the message out that women are welcome and this is about a higher purpose, and that would hopefully bring more female leaders into the ring.
I'll just echo what everybody has said and congratulate you, Dilip, on this excellent initiative. I think you're absolutely right. Showcasing examples and focusing on the SMEs is the right way to go, right? I mean, I know that in CII and FICCI, even getting SMEs to sign on to a simple code of conduct document made a difference. So, we're talking about purpose now, but even a code of conduct, which was simple, basic one-pager, that itself made a good, that itself was a good beginning. So I think taking this to the next level, making them aware, not by preaching, but by storytelling, by examples, by mentorship, will make a big difference. So yes, happy to help and heartiest congratulations. All the very best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, everybody. I mean, it's been a real privilege to, learn from all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhav. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
you. Pleasure meeting all of you.
Deep. Thank
Pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you.
Dilip, over to you. Any closing comments? And that's it.
Yeah, indeed, it was a great conversation. Thoughts, perspectives, and ideas shared are indeed inspiring. We at the Center for Higher Purpose in Business have lots to take away from this discussion to adopt and to live up to. I thank Dr. Azad Moopen, Dr. Diane Dodd, Dr. Mukund, Rajan, and Mr. Ruzbeh Irani for sharing us with your valuable time and insights. I request your continued patronage to the activities of the center. Thank you all who are watching this event, and please visit us at purposeroundtable.com and do give us your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.